to another episode of the Life After Cardiac Arrest podcast with me, your host, Paul Swindell. Today I'm speaking with Jamie Poole, who is a creative technologist in advertising and is an Australian resident in London. Jamie is a survivor, a cardiac arrest survivor, and you're 31 years old, I believe, and you had your first experience of this wonderful life that is life after cardiac arrest about 10 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, back when I was 20.
Dim and distant days, eh?
Yeah.
So how are you doing at the moment, Jamie?
Yeah, no, I think I'm being treated very well by Dr. Varnava and the team at Hammersmith Hospital, and I think they've got my condition sort of well managed now. And the last time I had an episode or an appropriate shock was 2.5 years ago now. That's, sort of at a heart transplant assessment up in Harefield Hospital, and since then, I think I've kind of probably self-medicating a little bit and just I've reduced my activity a lot, but otherwise, yeah, no, back to normal.
You mentioned that you had a condition, but you didn't actually say what it is. Can you tell us what condition you have and tell us a little bit about that condition?
Yeah, so I have a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. From my sort of general understanding, it's a thickening of the heart muscle, and that sort of causes the heart to struggle to effectively beat sometimes. And I'm not sure if we have figured out exactly yet why, though the my particular case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is leading to so many ventricular fibrillation episodes. So, I've had 8 additional episodes of VF since my original out of hospital cardiac arrest, and I'm not sure if we know yet why my HOCM has led to those episodes.
You called it HOCM. Is it HOCM or HCM? What should I call it?
I yeah, I guess I think I think there might be two technically different conditions, but I've heard it sort of spoken to me as HOCM before. But because I think that's HOCM, whereas there's also just HCM. So I'm not really too sure on what the actual medical difference is between those, but I use HOCM generally.
Is this a common condition? Do you know how many people are affected by this?
I think it's relatively common actually. I think it's about 1 in 500 in the UK will have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Common enough even. I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen or watches The Big Bang Theory, the American TV show, but one of their characters on there, Sheldon, he just sort of very off the cuff, they're talking about, oh, you just have a big heart, and he's like, no, that would be, I have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and so it just sort of made me think, well, it's actually it's common enough, I guess, for like Hollywood writers to understand and put it in a show as a joke. So it's definitely, I don't think it's a rare condition, but I think the severity of my situation is quite rare. I think most people can actually live their entire lives without ever having any symptoms or complications at all. They may not even be aware they have it, but unfortunately for me, it's decided to play up for the last 10 years.
I think you said that you had it your first SCA at the age of 20. So you had 20 years. Were you symptom free during all that time? Was
Yeah,
there?
definitely. Yeah, it was. I mean, even to the point where this still sort of just blows my mind. But my first preference for a career after high school was to join the Air Force, and so I joined the Royal Australian Air Force. I went through all the studies and testing to become an officer, which involves going to the University College, and I even passed the medical with no sort of notes or anything. So apparently, it didn't appear in the medical, and my mum is a nurse, so she always as a kid used to get me sort of regular ECGs and sort of checked up by her team at the hospital. And I think there was one time there was a mention of a slight murmur, but that's as far as that conversation went. They said, oh, they didn't know if it was a murmur or not. And I think once they might have treated me for asthma, but I don't have asthma, so that breathlessness might have been attributed. But again, nobody ever linked it to sort of heart problems while I was growing up.
What are the typical symptoms that people should watch out for?
To be honest, I'm not too sure. I think again, I think definitely a cardiologist, just going and see a cardiologist in general will probably be the best way to tell. But I guess from my experience, definitely if we had checked out that murmur probably a little bit more, they might have been able to dig a bit deeper. That I think was probably the first indication as a child that something might have been up. Whether or not it's even possible to go from to sort of leap from having a murmur to a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, I'm not sure. But yeah, I guess I honestly didn't really have any symptoms until I was 20. It never even crossed my mind that I would have had I would have had a heart condition. Not that I was playing cricket, I was playing soccer, I was playing tennis, almost semi-professionally. I was quite active as a teen. And quite sort of, as a normal teenager, going out drinking big, 24-hour all-nighters, and no issues at all. And then just suddenly out of the blue, walking to the train station one day, apparently that was too much. So I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly. So I don't even know how to explain what the symptoms would be like. So just it was so random for me when I was growing up.
Mhm. Yeah, that brings me to sort of the first introduction I had of you, or you obviously joined the group a number of years ago, but you wrote a blog post that we added to our first volume of the Life After Cardiac Arrest book, which is the 8 times I died, and you touched on it there. The first time when you had your sudden cardiac arrest, I think it's subtitled "How a Suit Saved My Life." Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite sad, and I still honestly think it's a reflection on society because I've experienced it more recently as well, where basically where I had my cardiac arrest was a town called Caboolture in Australia. It's just just south of the town like the area I grew up in called the Sunshine Coast, and it's often sort of joked as being this sort of less well off area. There's a lot of retirees, there's a lot of pensioners, there's a lot of people on welfare. So it there's naturally comes with that. There's some there's alcohol and drug problems that in that area. And so when I first collapsed at the train station, my mum met with the couple that I think eventually ended up calling 000 emergency services. And they said that most people there was quite a few people that just kept walking and stood over me, and they thought like they sort of shook their heads as if I was on drugs or just passed out drunk. So when this couple sort of walked over me and they saw that I had a suit on, that was the only reason why they said they stopped. They thought it was unusual that someone in a suit would be collapsed on the ground. So if I wasn't wearing a suit that day, if I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, it could have been another few minutes before maybe someone stopped to see if I was okay, and that by that time it might have been too late. So I definitely think that having that suit that day has saved my life. I've still got the t-shirt. I've still got my suit shirt in my bedside table right now. It's never left my bedside table. It's still stained from all the it's quite disgusting, I guess, when I think about it now. But it's still stained with all the Benadine and the antiseptic and everything that they used when they were treating me at the time. But it's just I I do want to frame it and actually get it nicely presented at some point, just for me as a reminder of what could have been.
Do you remember much about that actual situation, the time you went to the station? Have you got any recollection whether you felt ill beforehand or did you just collapse?
No, so I think talking to the people in your group as well, it's not the the memory loss that comes with that. And so I can't remember sort of a week to 2 weeks before the event, and I can't remember 2 weeks after. I was in a coma for a week, so I definitely can't remember anything sort of over that period. But yeah, I think I do have been told by those bystanders. So I was running to get to the train station, and I ran up the stairs of an overpass to get to the platform I needed to get to. And when I went up to the top of the stairs, I've gone down on one knee, and then I've stood up, and I think someone said they asked if I was okay at that point. I said no, I'm fine. I stood up, turned, and walked straight into a wall, and then collapsed down for good. And I don't remember any of that at all. So it's one of those weird things. I think we talk about it in your group as well. Is it almost feels like it happened to another person. I think, yeah, it didn't really. It probably if happened more. It was more of an event for the bystanders than it was for me. I woke up a week later, and from my perspective, nothing had happened. I woke up and people were telling me that this had happened, and I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. But it's a really weird feeling of just being disconnected from the event in a way.
How long were you down for? Do you know?
Yeah, so I got the Queensland Ambulance Service to send me the paramedics report, which was really interesting. So for a good 7, 8 years, I had no information at all of what actually happened. So I asked them for the paramedics report, and they were grateful enough to send it over. And yeah, so I think from the time the call came in to the time I think it's like spontaneous. Resusc
Ross.
Yeah, Rosk, until Rosk was about 47 minutes, I think. And even just from the time the call came in, so I think the call came in at 7:04 in the morning. The ambulance didn't actually even arrive until 7:11. So there was at least 7 minutes where I wasn't even getting paramedic support. And when they arrived, the first notes they have on their report is that he I was cyanotic, zero respiratory rate, and zero pulse. So and no one was doing CPR when the paramedics arrived. So
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. Like I almost don't. When I sort of asked my mum what cyanotic means, they were like, "Oh, well, that means when you present it as being blue." And like, I was like, "Well, like it's just amazing they even started CPR. Like,
Mm.
if they sort of turn up on scene and the patient's blue and no one's doing CPR and they've got no pulse, then what made them even think that I could be resuscitated?" But maybe, yeah, just I guess whatever they did or whatever they know has worked.
And so you said you're in a coma for a week. Would you know whether you were called at that time as well?
Yeah, so it was I think it was relatively new back then, but they call it cryotherapy. So I think as soon as I got to the hospital, they put me in an ice bath, and then medically induced coma. And yeah, I think again that probably has helped me not have brain damage and come out of this as healthy as I can.
Mhm. We're saying it's 10 years ago. So was it 2010?
So October 2009. Yeah.
And so when you did come out of that coma, what were you like? What was your brain function, and did you have any sort of obvious deficits at the time?
I don't know if it's obvious. I think, people were expecting it. I know speaking to my mum and my friends that people have said, the doctors have told them that I would definitely wake up with brain damage. They said when he wakes up, he's not going to be the same. So I guess they were prepared for me to be that way. And I think I definitely from them telling me stories, because again I can't really remember much of that period. When I did first wake up, they said I was repeating myself. So I had a friend who was visiting, and he would say, he'd ask me, "Oh, so how are you feeling?" And then I would answer, "Oh, good, good. How are you?" And then he'd say, "Yeah, I'm good." And then he'd say, "Yeah, so how you feeling?" And then I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm good, good. How are you?" And we just sort of went in this loop over and over again. But I don't know if that was just the drugs or the medication I was coming out of, or if it was still a lingering effect of the coma. I'm not sure whether or not, but I did eventually get sort of the preliminary psych exam. It was just a very simple 10-question sort of test to judge if I had any psychological problems, and I did fail because I think this is back in 2009. They asked me who was the Prime Minister of Australia, and I said George Bush. I think that registered me as a fail on that exam, but I think that was just me just getting confused with the question, and yeah, I'm not really sure why I answered that.
So what happened after leaving hospital? Were you diagnosed with HCM there?
Yeah, so I think they diagnosed me there with HCM, and they tied it in. Well, they started to piece together a family history. So before I was born, back in the 70s, my auntie had a child who died suddenly at the age of 3, and they attributed it at the time as a cot death. And I think that was purely because back in those days they didn't have the means to diagnose or understand sudden cardiac arrest. And so now, sort of once I'd had my condition, I have a cousin who also has a very severe case of it as well. Once we started to show symptoms, and when I woke up from the coma, we started to retroactively piece together a family history of actually that cousin of mine might have actually died from a sudden cardiac arrest, not a sort of unexplained cot death. And we then have since sort of discovered that it runs through my entire family from my mother's side. And yeah, it's a genetic inherited thing, and apparently it's a really strong gene. It's yeah, it's carried through.
Is there anything that can be done about that for future generations? I know there's new gene editing techniques, but don't know whether they can use those, or is it medication?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't necessarily followed up much on the gene side of things, but I'd like to think that, so obviously you got CRISPR, which is a gene editing technique, and I mean, even to a lesser extent, you've got the IVF and different fertility treatments, where I'd like to think if I was to make the choice to have children, that I could perhaps try and remove the condition from, or at least turn off the gene that has caused the condition in me, and maybe hope for the best. But I think ultimately, I don't think there is a cure necessarily for the condition at the moment. And in my case, the best, I guess, the next step in my treatment is just to get a heart transplant, because there's sort of no way to reverse or fix the condition the way it is. So yeah, if I was to have children, I think, and moving forward into the future, it would definitely be, hopefully just be able to turn off the gene, and that will be the problem, be the fix of it. But yeah, unfortunately, I think at the moment there's no real solution to it.
What was your medication regime when you first had it then?
So yeah, so when I first had, I woke up, the paramedics actually broke three of my ribs doing the CPR. So I was sort of strapped up quite tight, and I think I was on a few medications just to help with the broken ribs and the rib pain. But generally, I've been on a beta blocker, metoprolol, and an ECE inhibitor, perindopril, from the start. And those have sort of been the two main medications I was on when I first left hospital. And since then, I've had increases in my medication requirements.
And you've had increases in your medication requirements, I guess, because of what we touched on at the beginning, which is all of these recurrent episodes of appropriate shocks, which
Yeah.
suggest you're going into VTAC or V fibrillation. Perhaps we can sort of go through those now, because
Yeah.
it's. I do remember seeing somewhere that your doctor saying that I think you've suffered an unusual amount of shocks and therapeutic treatment from your ICD. Is do you know why that is? Is it because they haven't got the medication regime right, or is it because your conditioning's worsening?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I think, you know, with the I know with Dr. Varnava, we've definitely gone through a few testing phases. I've done an EP study, electrophysiological study. I've gone and checked for ablation. So they've tried all these different things to try and figure out what caused this sort of storm, or these last 10 years of all these appropriate shocks. But yeah, I'm not sure if we really have an answer to that question yet. I know, just generally speaking, I guess, me not self-medicating, but self-treating, and that I've definitely reduced my exercise level, and I think perhaps that has actually helped in some way. And I know the latest advice I got from the transplant team was, surprise enough, when you collapse on a treadmill, was just don't exercise at all. So it's definitely, I think, perhaps if there's a lifestyle change there that is probably the best way for me to treat it moving forward. But there is also I think everybody with this condition probably has that chat with their doctor where it's not good for your heart. Your heart eventually, especially with all the appropriate shocks, every time you go into ventricular fibrillation and then get a shock, you actually scar the heart muscle a little bit. So the more you have, and the more it continues on, the less effective your heart actually becomes, because it's just filled up with more and more scar tissue. So I think, it's not great in the long term, but for now, I think just managing it with lack of exercise and eating as healthy as I can, I think is probably. But yeah, we don't really know why. I don't think any of it happens.
Do you want to run through the various episodes then, and perhaps stop and when we get to the last one, just the therapeutic shocks, as it were.
Yes. Okay. So the first time. So once I was out of hospital, I had the broken ribs, and you just get this ICD implanted, and you sort of learn to live with that, and things.
How was that? Sorry, you're probably the youngest person I've spoken to on the podcast who's who's a survivor, but also you're 20 years old up till the point you've had your arrest. You're a fit and healthy guy, and then you had this episode, and then you come out of hospital not really well. You sort of got some understanding of why it's happened, but you've also got a bag of medications and an ICD in you as well. So, what's that done to you? Actually, how's it changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely scared me. I think anybody's probably lying if they say it's not scary experience to go through. Yeah, and I guess it does. It definitely put things into perspective. And I know, I mean, a part of it was part of it was the broken ribs in a way, in that I was restricted from going out and doing sort of, I was definitely sort of out of commission for a while, just by the ribs. So that, I guess, helped me with a little bit of the getting used to it, just being at home, not doing much activity, sort of helped me ease into the process of it. But since I sort of went back into the open world, you're definitely a lot more cautious, and I took things a lot more slower. And I wouldn't say I took less risk, but from the start, I definitely sort of just, I think, took a step back and was just reevaluating what was important and what was worth. Is it worth going out all and having an all-nighter? Is it worth drinking that energy drink? Is it, just little questions like that you have in your day-to-day life. So but that was immediately after the first accident. And I think, if one thing, eh, I've, in a very macabre sort of way, that the one way I've benefited from having so many appropriate shocks is that, I've been able to learn more, like, over time, just how to continue on with things, and just get over it, and sort of deal with deal with those sort of feelings, and actually just handle life as it comes. So I think going through the experience of having so many has actually been a benefit, in that it's helped me get used to it. But yes, I think definitely after that first one, though, being so young, it was definitely a, pun intended, a shock to the system. And so yeah, it was an interesting time. But
Interesting, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess I'm not really sure how else to explain it, but it was definitely an interesting way to spend your 21st birthday as well. So my 21st birthday was about 2 months after my event, so it definitely put a different spin on that birthday than what it would have been
I bet
otherwise.
it did. And your first appropriate shock, I think, was when you were 21 as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it'd been 18 months now since the initial out of hospital cardiac arrest. I was back to back to work, back to life, out with friends. And maybe this is a little bit of a sign of perhaps brain damage, or perhaps some sort of memory loss. But I guess I've always had uh, an easy time of forgetting. So, and I've used that to benefit, in the sense that I'd honestly, after 18 months, honestly had almost forgotten anything had even happened to begin with. It's just, and I think that actually helped me get on with my life. As I just, it's probably not the healthiest, and I'm sure if there's any mental health people sort of listening, they're probably screaming at me right now. But I think it definitely helped me just to sort of push it into the back of my head, and really just not think about it, and and try and forget it as much as I could. And so after the 18 months, I was living life. I think even the week before, I had gone up. We've got a mountain range just around on the Sunshine Coast, called the Glasshouse Mountains, and me and my friends stayed up all night. I had two Red Bulls, and then we went and climbed a mountain, and nothing happened. No ill effect was noticed. I definitely struggled climbing the mountain. I couldn't keep up with my friends. I ended up stopping on a plateau, which is like a semi, but they ended up going all the way up to the very peak. But still, yeah, no sort of flutters or heart issues on the back of that. And then a week later, I was at my cousin's and we were having a boys' night, playing video games, watching rugby league, and just sort of drinking. I think we had KFC for lunch, and then we had pizza for dinner, and then we just had lollies and energy drinks and soda all night. So it was definitely wasn't it wasn't
it
the, it
sounds
wasn't
it sounds like a disaster waiting to
yeah,
happen.
it wasn't the healthiest 24 hours of my life. But yeah, and so it was about 6 in the morning, and we sort of had enough playing our video games. So we're like, well, we might as well try and get some sleep now. We'll go to bed. So I had a sofa lounge downstairs, and we were playing video games upstairs. So I ran downstairs to get ready for bed. I'd forgot my phone, so I sort of jogged back up the stairs to get my phone. And then when I came back down the stairs again, I felt that what I now know as the 8-second feeling. I felt that. I felt sort of really dizzy, really sick, sort of really out of breath all of a sudden. And at the time, I remember actually attributing it to like, oh, like, God damn, I'm fat, or, like, I was just like, I've had a really unhealthy day, and I've just, I'm really, really, really unfit. And so I was like, okay, well, if I just lay down in bed, it will go away. And so I laid down on the sofa lounge for a minute, and the feeling just didn't go away. So I got back up and I was like, oh, well, I forgot to take my medication yesterday, and I hadn't taken it that day. So I'll go take my medication now. And I walked into the kitchen and reached up to the cupboard to get a glass to fill with water, and sort of, loud noise. Everything just got really loud. And then I remember just, car horns. Like, for some reason, the dream I had sort of dream of, New York taxis, the overground subway going over the top, car horns beeping, hot dog stand. And it's sort of like, it was almost like a segue from a sitcom TV show, like a Friends. If a Friends ever has to change scenes, they'll usually have these flashes of New York as they've changed scenes, and that's what it was, very much like that. And then I woke up and I was staring at the ceiling and had this really weird feeling, and it's definitely a feeling that stuck with me. Is I was sort of questioning reality. I sort of woke up and I honestly felt really good. I felt like I'd had a good 8 hours sleep. Like, I was relaxed. I was like, this is an amazing feeling. I feel so good right now. And I was sort of staring at the ceiling, and I was like, did I wasn't I at my cousin's last night? Did I actually, And then it was really like, if I was at my cousin's, why am I waking up now staring at a roof? Like, and it was this moment of like questioning reality. I couldn't actually really process what time of day it was, and what, if last night had happened, or if, it was just a really weird feeling of not knowing what reality was. And I sort of then snapped back into actual reality, I guess, and my heart was still racing. I think I did a quick sort of two fingers check, and I sort of clocked in my mind about 160 beats per minute. So it was still going quite fast when I woke up, and that kind of scared me a little bit. So this was the first time anything had happened in 18 months since the hospital, the big major thing. So it kind of scared me a little bit, and I had two options here. It was either try and drag myself across the floor to my phone on the table and reach up and get my phone, or just start calling out for help for my cousin to wake up and come down. And I decided to start calling for help, because I didn't think that crawling around on the ground would be the best option in that situation. And yeah, so luckily he heard me and came down, and they called the paramedics. But by the time the paramedics arrived, my ECG was all back to normal. I think my heart rate was back to 55, and they really couldn't tell that anything was wrong. Yeah, so that was the second incident of that.
Had they told you what to do if you had experienced a shock?
Not so much, but I mean, they even said that, no, I don't even need to call a paramedic most of the times, and I could almost attest to that after that experience, because when the paramedics did arrive, they did their ECGs, they read it, but my heart rate was back to 55, my beats were sort of healthy, there wasn't even a sign of a murmur anymore, like everything was back to normal. As far as their equipment was concerned, they were there treating a perfectly healthy 21-year-old. It didn't even there was no way that they could tell something was wrong until they took me to hospital and get my device interrogated. And so that's, I think, generally been the advice is that, I mean, obviously paramedics are great to have around if it's not getting any better or if you feel like the situation's worse. But I was told that, after 50, if it does happen, after 15 minutes, if I feel fine, I should be good enough just to stand up and go about my day. And yeah, I think, that's definitely the experiences I've had.
So after this experience, did it change you in any way? And did you have to go back to the cardiologist? And what did they do if you did?
Yeah, so after that one, I mean, it's quite childish now in hindsight, but the paramedics took me to hospital for precaution, and the cardiologist team there wanted to keep me overnight for observations. But it was actually the premiere date of the very first Avengers movie, and so all of my friends and I had bought tickets months before, and I just remember arguing with the doctors, like, no, you can't keep me in, like, the Avengers movie is out tonight. I've got to go and see the Avengers movie. But unfortunately, they won, and I had to miss it and spend the night in hospital. But yeah, after that, I think it it was quite far as well. I've definitely had it more lucky here in London, where I do have the opportunity just to go to the hospital, which is just down the road from me, and get an interrogation. But back in Australia, the hospital I was being treated at was an hour and a half drive away, in the nearest city. So it wasn't really an option to just pop over to the cardiologist and get an ICD interrogation. So I honestly went back to work and back to life, and went about like nothing happened. And again, sort of that, however unhealthy or healthy it is, I just put it, squashed it down, put it in the back of my mind, and forgot about it, and went about my business. And yeah, I think life sort of went back to normal for about another 18 months, and hadn't thought about it. And about 6 months to a year after that, I was working in an advertising agency in my small little town, and my boss at the time was like, have you ever? She just came back from London, and she had an agency over here, and an advertising agency over here, and she was like, you should really go. There's a lot of work over there. It's really exciting work. For a young digital advertiser, it's the mecca of business opportunities. So I was like, yeah, well, I'll have a look. So I had a look online, and there was a certain visa I could get. So on a whim, I was like, oh, it only costs $300 or something like that. So I applied for it just to see what would happen. And 3 weeks later, I got the visa back, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And I think that was on a Wednesday. Like, I know it by day. So that was on a Wednesday. And then on the Thursday, the next day, I went to the travel agent. I was like, well, how much would it be for a one-way flight to London? No, she was like, well, I've got one here for $600. It leaves on Saturday. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll take it. And yeah, within the span of a week, I'd gone from having working in a small agency in my hometown to being in London. I sort of just remember telling my mum and my grandparents, like, hi, like, I'm moving to London next week, forever, bye. It was just a really, so yeah, I don't know what, I like to think that my heart has like changed my output, like changed my outlook in a way that led to that decision. But I, I honestly couldn't really pinpoint it. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. But again, I think that attributed to just forgetting about, you know, I, my heart condition honestly didn't even come into the equation when I was thinking about coming here to London. Like, I didn't think, oh, what have I got to do for medication, and what have I got to, that I just honestly didn't think about it at all in my day to day. So it was just, yeah, it was just a really spur of the moment decision. And I was over here and sort of arrived, and I had 50 kilograms, I think, of luggage. I had two suitcases, and I didn't, obviously, because it was so quick, I didn't have time to really suss out accommodation. So I was staying the first week in a hotel, the Easy Jet Hotel. And it was, when I arrived, it was in Earls Court, and it was and even just the journey, the train from Heathrow was had broken down at Teddington or somewhere around that area, or just somewhere halfway. And everyone had to disembark and walk up the stairs and go across to another platform. And I remember asking, like, is there no elevator? And they're like, no, there's no elevators in London. And I'm like, oh, great. So I had to carry 50 kilograms of luggage up these stairs and at this small train station, and finally made it to Earl's Court train station. And I was like, oh, this was back before the refurbishments. Earl Court has now been refurbished, but before, when I first arrived 6 years ago, there was no elevator there either. So I had to drag my 50 kilograms of luggage up the stairs at Earl's Court. And then when I finally got to the hotel, they were like, your room's on the sixth floor. And I was like, great, is there an elevator? And they're like, no, there's no elevator. So once I got to the hotel, I had to then carry, and after all of that, like, carrying around this luggage all through London, still nothing happened. No, no events, no. So it just really led to, like, just really played into this idea of just being able to forget. Um,
Okay, so you weren't worried about stairs prior to that because at the station when you first had a cardiac arrest, it was soon after running up some stairs, and then at your friend's house, you'd run up some stairs, hadn't you?
yeah, exactly. Well, at that point, I hadn't really put, I think I've definitely become more reflective now, but so yeah, now I would definitely be completely worried if I had to do that with a set of stairs. But back then, I think I just didn't really have that mindset, or didn't think, which again makes me lead to, it does make me realize how much of my condition is mental, or how much of my day to day hang ups are actually just mental, and might not necessarily be physical.
So you're in London. So what happened next in terms of your cardiac arrest? Because I think it was not until a couple of years later that it reared its ugly head again.
Yeah, so I was in London then for a year. Again, nothing had happened in that year, and it had been about 18 months now since my second at my cousin's. And like I tended to do, I just put it in the back of my mind, and had gotten to the point where I just completely forgot about it. And I was walking to work one day. The agency I got a job at here was in Covent Garden, just off Drury Lane. And so I got off at Covent Garden Station. I started walking down Long Acre towards Drury Lane. And about halfway there, I sort of felt this flood. Like, I just felt this sort of, like, my heart skip a beat. And I sort of thought something was wrong at the time. And I remember looking in a shop front window just to, I don't even know why I wanted to look, but I just sort of wanted to see if everything was okay. And I remember my skin looked really pale, like, just like white. And at the time, like, my first thought was like, right, well, I need to go get some sun. I've been spending way too much time inside. But my hands started getting a bit clammy, and I didn't really put, I hadn't become an expert at that point, but I didn't put two to two together, so I kept walking. And as I kept walking, it gradually just got worse and worse and worse until I turned the final corner to the office, and I saw some colleagues sitting across the road having a cigarette. And I was like, well, okay, I'm feeling really bad. But sort of like at my cousin's the second time, I sort of thought that if I go sit down, or if I go and rest, that perhaps it will just go away by itself. And I've later found out that that's not the case. It's impossible for that to happen in a way. But at the time, I thought, okay, well, if I just go and say hello to my colleagues and sit down, I might be able to just ride this out. But unfortunately, yeah, I walked over to the road. I did end up sitting down with them, but then apparently, I can't necessarily remember this, but they said that I sort of passed out and sort of leant over to my colleague's shoulder and had a little bit of a seizure, like a wobble. And then I woke back up, but to me, I can't remember that at all. Like, I don't even, like, I tell them, like, "Are you sure I passed out? I don't remember passing out." But then, yeah, they said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I think I just had a cardiac arrest." And they naturally sort of got that look on their face, and they're like, "Well, do you want us to call a paramedic?" And you know, I, it had been so long, and it's still only really the second occurrence outside of my first main one. So I was a little bit scared myself, and obviously being in London, so I was like, yeah, can you call the paramedics? So they called the paramedics, and they took me in for observation. And yeah, it was a really really weird one, because I definitely felt the shock. No, sorry, I didn't feel the shock in that one. So it was a weird situation of, I didn't really know what had happened. I wasn't even sure if I had had a cardiac arrest. I sort of I assumed so, because of how my heart and my body felt, but I couldn't really, like, it wasn't until the doctor came back and they said, yeah. So when I first felt that feeling halfway down the walk, I had started to go into polymorphic VT, and then I was in polymorphic VT for 10 minutes before it degraded into ventricular fibrillation, and at that point, I had the appropriate shock from that.
Could I just stop you there? There's two things I want to ask you. Polymorphic VT. I've heard of VT, but what's polymorphic VT? And the second thing is, do you know if your device was trying to pace you out of that, or can it be paced out of?
Yeah, so polymorphic VT, I think it's also called points. Yeah, to start the point or something similar to that. I think it's just it's a form of VT that is an even more irregular slash not so it's not a constant. So I think VT is technically just a accelerated heart rate. So I think when you're exercising, you do go into SVT, which is so it's you do go into form of VT, which just by increasing your heart rate. Whereas polymorphic VT is a increased heart rate, but in a very erratic way that the actual heartbeat and the way that the beat is made up on an ECG, it's very erratic. So that it's I think it's the precursor of going into ventricular fibrillation and completely dissolving into an erratic heart rate. And then yeah, so sorry, what was the other part of that
And
question?
would your ICD have been trying to
Right.
pace you out of that? Because they can do pacing therapy, can't they? Most of them, I think.
Yeah, so I think they can. I think the device I has can, but from every interrogation and place I've gone to, they actually don't have the pacing set on mine. I think what they've found, especially with this first event, so what really confused them with this first event was that my device from Australia, because at that point my device had been implanted in Australia, and so the UK team didn't really have much of a say in how it was programmed. It was originally programmed in Australia, and they programmed it not to pace. And the UK team, when they evaluated that after this cardiac arrest or after this incident, they found that the polymorphic VT actually started when my heart rate was only 70. So I don't really know the science of how that happens, but I think it sort of, my heart was erratic but it's still like just beating slowly, but being erratic. And so because it was beating slowly, the ICD didn't actually pick it up until it started to get into the speed that would go into a monitor zone. So what they had to do was they just increased the monitor zone to take it all the way down so that the monitor zone of my ICD is now very low start to a very sort of mid-low section. So they just had to lower that. But in terms of pacing, they decided to keep it off because technique. I think the way it is when you go into at that point. I don't know if pacing is effective, or what it's been explained to me is that the pacing wouldn't be effective if we turned on the pacing because at that point a shock is the only thing that's going to reset the system effectively.
That was a quite a surreal experience, I imagine, all of that, if you don't really know what was happening at the time and understand that you had some more experiences not that long afterwards.
Yes, I mean, I guess, stupidly slash, as you're probably familiar with now, I went back to work the next day. I probably should have taken some time off, but I was like, no, I'm fine. But, everything's fine. What happened yesterday? I can't remember what happened yesterday. So I went back to work the next day and continued on with my week, and everything seemed fine again until, so that wasn't, it was actually quite a comical series of events. That was on a Thursday that I had this cardiac or this incident, and then I went through the weekend. Everything was fine, and then the next Thursday, I actually then had a second and a third event. So I was sort of walking to the office again, back to normal. Everything felt fine. Didn't feel any funny feelings walking to the office. Didn't feel like anything was wrong or happening. Made it to the office door and started. So our office was up 4 flights of stairs. So every day I would walk up these 4 flights of stairs to get to our office. And this day I'd made it up the first 2 flights of stairs, and then I woke up and I was at the bottom of the first flight of the stairs. So, and I was sort of sprawled up against the corner of the stairwell, and my heart was still rapidly racing. So obviously, now only being a week out of having my previous other one, I was almost starting to get a little bit familiar with the feelings, and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I think I know what's happened." And unfortunately, while I was laying there, I then felt my heart start to beat irregular. Like I felt that feeling start again and start all in that whole process start all over again as I was laying there sprawled up against the wall. And then I went into another episode of ventricular fibrillation as I was laying there from the first event. And that's when a colleague came up the stairs and they saw me and they asked me if I was okay. And I was like, no, you better call a paramedic again because I'm now at the bottom of the stairwell and I don't know what sort of damage I've done. And yeah, so that was sort of that was 4 and 5, just within 15, 20 seconds of each other. And when we interrogated the device afterwards, it showed that I went into polymorphic VT again, which led into VF. And then the second one, I think Dr. Varnova called a rebound VF. So apparently it's a thing where you get treated successfully for the first VF, but then your heart straight away puts you back. So it gets, I don't know. Yeah, I can't, I guess I'm not the best person to explain it, but sort of my heart just rebounded straight back into VF after it had received an effective treatment. And so then I had the second shock from that at that point. And after that one, that was a little bit more scary, having two in a row, being at the bottom of the stairs, realizing that okay, that time I definitely passed out because as I said, the first time I didn't really believe my colleagues when they said I'd passed out and has a seizure, and this was pretty much a wake up call. Like, no, you just fell downstairs. Like you just had a cardiac arrest on the stairs. You passed out, and you just tumbled down the stairs. So that sort of hit me a little bit harder, that one,
I bet
emotionally.
hitting the
So
bottom of the stairs
yeah,
hit you a bit harder as well.
again, yeah, pun unintended there. But yeah, that was a bit scary for me. So that one at the hospital, because it had been a week since the last one, they decided to keep me um, in observation for 3 nights at the Marylebone Hospital in central London. Which another, I think, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's my personality, but I thought it was actually quite an upside to the whole situation was getting I, when the call came out, the same paramedic that was at the last one came to this time, and they then also called out a full ambulance. So he was on a motorbike, and they called the full ambulance as well. And when they took me to hospital, the motorbike paramedic gave the ambulance an escort through central London, and I was sort of just sitting there in the back getting preliminary ECGs and things like that, and just sort of looking out the front and seeing like a motorcycle escorting. So I just thought it was just like a surreal moment of like, I can't believe I'm getting a motorcycle escort through like the center of London right now. It was a really weird. It was a really like weird feeling of like, okay, it sucks to be in this situation, but well, how many people get to have a
VIP
have a
treatment
motorcycle escort? Yeah,
reserved for
exactly.
politicians and ambassadors and the like.
Yeah, so that was a really weird feeling, but yeah, that was unfortunately 3 nights. They kept me in Marylebone Hospital 3 nights for that one, but again, they couldn't find anything. Like not that they couldn't find anything wrong, but there was no indication of anything wrong after I had arrived at hospital, and after 3 days they let me leave.
Is there any
Um,
change in medications or anything, or what to do?
so so not at that point. So at that point, I just went back to my life, and that again happened on a Thursday, and they kept me in hospital. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 3 nights. So, sorry, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and they discharged me on the Sunday, and I went back to work on the Monday. Yeah, which is probably a little bit stupid. I don't. I think one of my part of my coping mechanism is to actively try and forget and just keep myself busy to sort of just get over the emotional side of these incidences. So I went back to work on that Monday, and against that, I was feeling fine. Just spent 3 days in hospital feeling fine, and there's also this like restless feeling of. I'm sure some listeners have probably had it, but if you've ever, yeah, I guess for me, when I go to hospital after these things, I know I'm healthy. I don't know how to explain, but uh, I think after the second one, there was a case where like doctors were actually rushing around the ward, going, "Oh, we don't have enough beds for people. We don't have enough rooms." And the nurses were all talking to each other, saying like, "Oh, we don't, we have to move this patient here because we don't have a bed and all this sort of thing." And I'm sort of sitting there on this bed, thinking like, A, I want to go and see Avengers, and B, I'm completely healthy and I'm just totally wasting a bed space right now. Like I could get up and run if I wanted to, and you're keeping me here in a bed and wasting a bed. So I had that sort of restless feeling again at this when they kept me in 3 days and surrounded in this cardiac unit full of people who were having serious heart problems, and I was just laying there getting free food and medical attention for something that I didn't really necessarily need. But so by the time the Monday came, I just like, okay, I'm going to get back to work and get back into things. And again, everything felt fine. Everything went back to normal. No worries, no flutters, no, nothing really ever happened. But then come the Thursday, so that's the weird thing. 3 Thursdays in a row. Come the Thursday, I was walking to the office, and this time I made it to the front door. And then when I got to the front door, I felt the whole feeling starting. At this point, I'd become a professional at dying, so I was like, okay, I've got this. I know exactly what this feeling is. I know I'm about to go into cardiac arrest. I know what's coming. So I sort of tried to think what could I do in that situation. While I was in the Marylebone Hospital for 3 days, one of the team members told me about this 8 seconds that an ICD takes about 8 seconds to charge its shock to before it delivers you. So during those 8 seconds, I'll be in VF or I'll be in VT and I'll be able to feel that, but then after 8 seconds, it will shock me. So that's when I really learned about this 8 second rule and what I call the 8 seconds of dying. But then, so I'd felt this feeling. I knew I was in it, and I was trying to figure out what I should do. And so I saw the keypad on the front door, and there's a button to call reception. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll call my receptionist, and I'll let her know to call an ambulance or something, or come down and get me because no one was around at this point. And so but when I was looking at the keypad, I'd used it for the last 18 months. I could not figure out how to call the receptionist. So I don't know if at that point that was a bit of hypoxia or just panic, or I'm not sure, but I could, staring at that keypad for a few seconds, I could not figure out what button to push to call the receptionist. So I ended up just sitting down and waiting it out. And yeah, a couple of seconds later, got the shock. And that one, luckily, I didn't actually. I know I didn't pass out for that one, and then I got the shock. I felt the full
I was
kit.
going to say, did you feel it? And there's so many people want to know, what does a shock feel like? And as you've explained already, lots of them you don't feel anything because you've perhaps gone unconscious. But this one, what did it feel like?
Yeah, so this one was it was a thud, and I mean, it's just horse court. Like I think my cousin, who's had them as well, their family's into equestrian, and she's like, it's getting like getting kicked in the chest by a horse, and I'm like, well, I've never really experienced that, but it sort of is that very much like it's just that big punch to the collarbone, sort of upper chest area. For me, I sort of feel it go up the side of my neck, and then I start to taste metal in my mouth. So I get a really metallic taste in my mouth. And then, luckily, though, it does sound painful and it does hurt at the point of it. But for me, at least, it dissipates after a few seconds. Like it's a very short pain. It doesn't linger in any way for me, at least, anyway.
So much better
Um,
than the alternative as well.
Exactly, yeah. It's so much better. This one actually kind of freaked me out a little bit because after it had happened, I threw up. And I asked the doctor afterwards again because the company, at this point, it was almost out of my control. The company just called the paramedics as soon as they found out about it. And the doctor then told me that it's one of the body functions when everything like this is going on is just like send all the blood it can back to the heart to keep it going. But the side effect of that is then your stomach and everything else has to sort of go as well. So that might have been a reason why I vomited after I woke up or after that event. But yeah, and funny enough, it was the same paramedic as well. He came around. So for three times, 3 Thursdays in a row, the same time every Thursday, and the same paramedic all times. And he sort of joked to me as they were preparing me for the actual ambulance that was arriving. He was joking that every morning for the last like every Thursday morning for the last 3 weeks, he's been trying to buy a bagel around the corner at a cafe when he gets the call that I've had a cardiac arrest. So he said next week he's just going to wait an extra hour before he goes to the cafe, just in case. I was like, yeah, oh, sorry about that. Sorry to ruin your breakfast. But, yeah, so that one, after that one, I sort of took the hint, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take a few weeks off. And my company at the time was really, really good about it. They completely supportive and understanding, and they actually then offered. Well, they did ultimately. They paid for my mum to come over, so they flew my mum from Australia. They paid for her hotel. And they got her actually an Airbnb on the same street that I live. So she was living just pretty much across the road for 3 weeks.
Great
Yeah,
to
they
hear
just
from an employer doing something like that, because I've heard lots of other stories that weren't quite so good from employers after people have
yeah, I
progressed.
know. I feel guilty. Like it's just I can't believe how lucky I got. They were great people. It was the people more than the company, I think. But they just really looked after me, and they even got so during those 3 weeks when I decided to go back to work, they like gave me a car hire for a month to take me to and from the office, so I didn't have to walk from the train station anymore. And it was just, yeah, they've just like, I wouldn't be in London anymore, and I wouldn't, and in a really sort of grim sort of way, I might not even be alive anymore if it wasn't for how my company treated me at that time and really helped me through those events, even to the point where the CEO of the company, he took me to the hospital. He took me to my first transplant. So after that point, Dr. Varnova started to recommend me for the transplant. We couldn't figure out why I'd had this sort of what she called a storm. And my boss at the time, he's like, well, you can't go to the transplant hospital yourself. So, my CEO drove me and stayed with me all day at the hospital. So, yeah, they were really, really good in just looking after me. So it was almost just, I can't believe how lucky I am, especially when I read the stories you do hear that not everyone gets that same treatment from their employers. But yeah, so I took the 3 weeks off, and that's where Dr. Vanova increased my medication. Then she put me on amiodarone, which, speaking to some of the people at the meetups and the catch ups we go to, I think it's quite a powerful drug when you're first getting loaded onto it. That you get very dizzy for a few weeks. You get this sense of vertigo as a side effect, and so it really took me a while to get used to that medication and the side effect of it as well. I think it actually damages your liver or your thyroid, or it's not a good drug for your body. But Dr. Vanova felt like it was necessary to keep my heart under control, and we went on that medication from there. And that sort of then it started to go away. Like sort of started to go back to normal. All the feelings went back to normal, and then 6 months later, I was at work once more. At this point, again, 6 months is enough time for me to forget about it. So I'd forgotten about it. I just back to life as normal. I was starting to get a little bit more cautious of stairs, like to the point now where I started to just give myself a breather at the top. So, like I said, there's 4 flights of stairs to get to my office. So before I didn't even think about it, but now when I got up to the top of the 4th flight of stairs, I just stopped and really sort of made sure I caught my breath before I continued about my day. So I was starting to get a little bit more cautious about stairs and walking in general. And yeah, this day though felt 100% normal. Made it up the first 2 flights of stairs fine, and I actually made it up to the top of the 4 flights. And I felt really good. I felt quite energized, and I felt like I was quite proud of myself that I didn't even feel like I needed to take a breather this time, like just psychologically as well. Like I felt, oh, I'm feeling really good about this. I can just continue on without stopping. But then my HR manager, she followed me up the staircase after I did. And when she got up to the top and saw me, she started talking to me. We had a conversation, and she started to walk into the office. And I was like, well, not to be rude. Like I really wanted to stop and have a breather psychologically, but I didn't want to be rude as well. So maybe the bit of the British culture had rubbed off on me. I don't know. I wanted to be polite, so I followed her into the office and continued talking with her. And as we're walking down the hallway of the office, I felt that feeling. I just and straight away I instantly recognized it. And it's quite weird. So at this point, I knew it couldn't help, but I got to about halfway down, and I was looking around for a chair to sit on. I was like, okay, if I just sit down, it's going to go away. And I don't know why I keep telling myself that lie, but I don't know if it's just a part of the mind trying to like think of any way to save itself. But I just I was just like, okay, well, if I get back to my desk, I'll sit back down at my desk and I'll take a break and I'll just pray that, or not pray, but hope that it goes away. And then when I got back to my desk, in from my experience, what happened then was that the HR manager followed me to my desk and she called out my name and she wrote my name 3 times on a whiteboard that magically appeared next to my desk. But what happened in reality apparently is that I slumped over and fell off my computer chair, and when I woke up, a freelancer was sort of cradling my head down towards the ground as they were lowering me to the floor. So I sort of again put two and two together, and I was like, okay, so that happened again.
You must
And,
really freak out your work colleagues.
yeah, well, this was a freelancer as well. This is someone who had no experience of the last sort of 2 months of all this happening. Or 6 months, sorry, of all this happening. So he didn't have any context to it at all. He said that he saw me sit down and he asked me a question, and he said my face just went all slack, and then I slumped over, and he rushed around to like pull me down to the ground. So yes, it must have been crazy for him, but it was definitely, yeah. My colleagues now had almost gotten used to the sight of me getting stretchered out of the office. Yeah, when it happens 5 times in such a short period, everyone's just like, "Oh, Jamie needs the ambulance again." There it is. And it was actually, I was quite gracious. I was quite gracious for it as well, in that when I was laying on the ground, obviously I was quite self-conscious because I'm just laying there after apparently slumping over and having a cardio arrest, and so I was a little bit self-conscious. But everybody was good in that they were sort of. I knew they were trying not to look, but they were they went about their business without really making that much of a fuss about it,
Mhm.
which I actually appreciated a little bit. So, yeah, that was number 6 at this
I'll
point.
bet you were making sure that you wore clean underpants every day that period.
It's just one of those things where you're like, oh god, that was definitely the one where I started then, okay, like I have to think about this more often. And that was where I really started to think, okay, I can't keep forgetting. Like I can't keep shoving this in a little box and putting it in the back of my head, because it's not going away, unfortunately. And so that was where I really then started, and there was definitely a period of a little bit of depression, and it sort of led to these sort of, I think that the doctor said at the time was PTSD. And sort of, I started developing these safety behaviors of, even continues now, where if I'm walking after about 500 meters or so, or not even then, if I start to feel anything, like if I feel that my heart rate is even raised by 2 beats per minute, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll make sure it goes back down to 55 before I continue. So I think, that's where these sort of unhealthy behaviors have started to creep into my life. But I definitely started paying attention a lot more after that one, and
do,
just making sure
do
that.
you wear anything like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch to keep an eye on your heart rate? Or is it all?
No, so my boss, well, my company did buy me a Fitbit. That was another one of the gracious perks that they were really good with. They bought me a Fitbit. They bought me a cookbook for heart healthy food. They really, really looked after me. But yeah, so I did have a Fitbit for a while. But there was a case when I was at the Hammersmith train station, and I just walked up a set of stairs, and I glanced down at the Fitbit, and it said that my heart rate was 110. And that sort of just freaked me out a little bit, and I had to stop and pause, and I didn't feel like it was going 110, but I was like, well, if the Fitbit says it's going 110, I'm stopping what I'm doing. And then when I sort of felt through that and waited that out, I was like, okay, I can't. Like, I did do some research online, and the Fitbit is not rated. It's not a medical device. The Fitbit is not rated for medical readings of your heart rate. It's an estimate at
Mhm.
best, but it's not accurate enough to make any sort of medical
Yeah,
decisions
I
based
would
off.
agree with that. Good over sort of a long period, I think. I take the resting heart rate from that. I think that's reasonably good, but you're right. It's not any one reading you should not necessarily take it with a little pinch of salt. I would so, but I believe the Apple Watch has got FDA approval and is supposed to be classed as a medical device. I think.
Yes, I think the Apple, and to be fair, this was, so this was now 3 years ago, so technology's undoubtedly improved in that time, even within Fitbits. So Fitbits might actually be as accurate now as the smartwatches because they use a different technology. I think at the time, the Fitbit I had was just using the sort of the laser, the light technique to get the pulse. So I don't think that was very accurate. But yeah, so I did have that, and then it just sort of I don't wear a watch, so personal preference. It just sort of wasn't fitting into my lifestyle to wear it, and if it was just going to freak me out whenever I looked at the numbers, I figured it wasn't probably worth wearing full time. Again, like exactly, the theme of this interview sort of has been that my coping mechanism is just package it up and forget about it. And if I'm wearing a watch that tells me every time I look at it what my heart rate's doing, it's a bit hard to forget.
Mm.
It's a bit hard to package it up in the back of your mind if you're staring at your heart rate on a screen every time you glance down. So yeah, just I think I never really got into the Fitbit Apple Watch.
Uh-huh.
Um,
You mentioned that you've been mentioned to you that you might be suffering some PTSD like safety behaviours. So did you receive any counselling or any help to help you work those through?
yeah, so I went to the Charing Cross Hospital have always been really great care for me. So is where Dr. Varnava was originally based, and she's now at Hammersmith Hospital. And so they've always offered really good care, and they put me up with a specialist cardiac counselor who actually specializes in helping people post cardiac arrest
Oh, I didn't know there was such a
get
person.
through. Yeah, so he was really good, and he knew how to deal with that. And we were talking about talking about stopping. And one of the activities he wanted me to do was, okay, he was like, let's go for a walk outside. When you start to feel like you want to stop, just push through that feeling. And just every day, if you keep pushing through that feeling, eventually you'll start to push that feeling sort of back and back and back and back. And so it's like, okay. So we went out for a walk and we started walking and we started talking. And I got about halfway and I was like, okay, I felt the feeling. I really, really want to stop right now. And he's like, no, let's keep going. So I started to walk, just only a few steps more. And I was like, nope, I've gone into VT. I know it. And so I sat down on a park bench that happened to be beside us, and I waited it out, and it went away, and sort of I went into the full panic mode, and it was good in a way because he got to see me have a panic attack in a sense, or have an event. But it did turn out when I went and got my device interrogated that afternoon that I'd gone into polymorphic VT. So it was kind of a weird outcome from the counselor where his advice was to try and push through these feelings of to break the safety behaviors by pushing through these awkward these feelings I have. But in the same respect, in doing that, he proved that the feeling that I feel actually may be a cardiac arrest on the
Hmm.
way. So it might actually be safer to just stop what I'm doing and wait for it to dissipate. So yeah, it was a weird outcome from that. And after that, I didn't really see anybody else. I just sort of try to deal with it myself.
So what happened next? And I think you've got one more, or two more events, haven't you, to tell?
Yeah, so two more now. So after that one, after it started to take a little bit more notice and a little bit more care, I reduced my exercise activity. Just started to, I'd started stopping. I started these safety behaviors of stopping whenever I started to feel a little bit uneasy in the chest. And so it had been 18 months gone by, nothing had happened. Everything seemed like it sort of got back to normal life. I didn't forget about it this time, but it was definitely, it was just starting to get routine. And I was almost not so much forgetting about my heart now, but I was forgetting the feeling of having an event and an incident. And my visa in the UK had actually had expired. So I had to go back to Australia to get my visa renewed because you can't get it renewed here in the UK. And when I went back to Australia, my grandfather became unwell, and it all happened really sudden. So I was in Sydney with my mum, and then we got the call that apparently the doctors said that we need to go there immediately because he's in hospital. And so we pretty much got on the next flight up to Brisbane to go see him. And I just got off the plane. I felt fine. I mean, we were, I guess, a little bit. I mean, you'd probably characterize it. I mean, we weren't calm because it wasn't enough. We knew we weren't going to a nice situation, and especially for her, this was her dad. This is my grandfather, and I grew up with him, and he was, for all intents and purposes, my father because my mum went to university when I was a baby, so I was raised by him. But for her, I think it was just, it was a lot more of an emotional situation. And we got off the plane, and she sort of rushed off ahead. She wanted to get out of the airport as quick as possible and get to the hospital as quick as possible. But at that point, I was still doing my safety behaviors where I still took it slow. I still made sure, so I wasn't rushing, even though I was distressed. I just made sure I wasn't rushing. And so I got off the plane, walked up the stairs to get to the terminal. As soon as I got to the top of the stairs with my suitcase, I felt I felt myself go back into that feeling again, and I was like, "Oh God, here we go! Like I'm on, like I'm at an airport now. Like what am I gonna do?" So again, I just imagined if I walk slowly, I might be able to just ride this thing out, and it will go away by itself. So I started to walk really slowly up the arm of the airport, up the arm of the terminal towards the gate, but it didn't go away. And when I just made it to the front of the gate, and I sort of just dropped my suitcase, and I sat down on the floor, and this passenger came up and asked me, are you okay? And I couldn't speak at that point, so I just sort of shook my head. Then I imagine my face probably must have looked really white and whatnot. So she ran and got one of the attendants at the gate, and they came over and called the paramedics. And everybody knows there's a whole gate of everybody waiting to board a plane. So there's hundreds of people in this gate, and I'm just sort of sitting there, and paramedics turn up, and all the security turns up, and it's this big hoopla event. And then the paramedics come along, and they take off my jumper. So here I am, topless, naked, like in front of 300 people in an airport. And the paramedic guy's trying to put the ECG leads on, and he couldn't actually get them to stick with my chest hair. So he's there, and he's like, I'm gonna have to shave you, and I'm like, oh great. So here I am in front of 300 people getting my chest hair shaved in an airport. And so it was one of those just really really weird experiences. But yeah, and so my mum, so after that had all happened, my mum called me on my phone, and I mean, it's great. It's quite funny, and she probably hates that I tell this story, but the first thing she said when I picked up was, "Well, where the f are you?" And I was like, "Well, sorry to say, but I had another event." I think I literally answered her. I said, "I died back at the airport," is what I said to her. I died back at the gate. And so she came. Like I think her reaction at the time was like, "This is how normal it's gotten in our family now." I think her reaction was, "Oh, not again." That was just, it was just like, "Oh God, like, here we are, gotta go again." So she came back, and yeah, and the paramedics looked after me they just did a quick checkup, and they couldn't see anything wrong after the 15 minutes, and they just asked me if I'd like they asked me if I'd like to go for observation, but it turned out, I guess, so my grandfather died that week, but it sort of turned out oddly serendipitous that it happened while I was back in Australia because I had to get my visa renewed. So, it's quite a short window that I was in Australia, and that's when he passed away. So it all sort of worked out. Ultimately, I do imagine the worst case scenario that week could have been that my mum could have lost her dad and her son in the same few days span. So that definitely could have turned out a lot worse. We actually also lost our dog, so our dog died that week as well. So that one week she could have had her dog, her dad, and her son die on her, which probably well, not probably, but that wouldn't have been a great week for her.
No, you could say that.
What I really found interesting being in your group on Facebook and going to the meetups is just how little I've had to, well, not purposefully, but just how little I've actually given thought to the bystander experience, and what my mum goes through when these sort of things happen, and what you're sort of what are the people around you going through when you're having these? Because I guess I treat it quite lightly, but to my mum, it's probably not. It's not a joke to her. It's not as funny as it is to me. It's that it's not as funny to her as it is to me that I got a motorbike escort through central London. She's thinking that I could have died 13,000 miles away from home. So yeah, I think it's been really good being a part of the group and just sort of taking that perspective that I think, everybody else goes through this, I think, a lot more than you actually do.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that's a little bit underlooked so far, in that they don't really get the care and the help that they need afterwards. And hopefully we can do things to address that. I think being part of a group where they can chat through their experience helps to a certain degree, but some people do experience PTSD and maybe need professional help as well. But
Yeah,
which some of them can get through the group, again thanks to the free counselling from SADS. If you're listening and you are even a survivor, or a partner, or someone who's done life saving on someone else, then if you are experiencing PTSD or a lot of anxiety, then perhaps you should contact SADS UK and get some free counselling. That's if you can't get it through your normal route in a timely manner, i.e. through your GP. And I know that's not always easy to get, to tell the truth, which is why we have this free counselling. Okay,
yeah, it's great.
okay, so that was your last appropriate shock, and then there's another episode that you had, which is sort of slightly unusual and possibly worrying for some people, but I imagine it's quite a rare occurrence. Could you explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I mean, so now I guess we're all caught up. So we're up to my latest event, however you wanna call it. So at this point, I was well into so every 6 months I'm being seen by the Harefield Hospital transplant team, and I'm getting routine assessments on whether or not I should be considered for the heart transplant list. And a part of those routine checkups is a full phys. So they do an MVO2 test, or it might not be an exact MVO2 test. It's basically a test they do on a treadmill, and they put like a Darth Vader oxygen mask really tightly around your face so that they can control exactly how much oxygen you receive while you're doing this test. And what they then test is how effective you breathe and how effective your heart handles exercise. And previously, for the last 2 or 3 times, I'd actually stopped the test early because I'd started to feel that feeling. And they actually really were almost angry, or not angry, but they were just really disappointed in that they hadn't actually got a proper result from me yet. Because when you start this test, you can't actually stop and restart it. So if once you stop, the test is over. They can't. Your future results will be affected by the sort of the part where you stopped it. So you're only allowed to do it once, and once you stop it, they've got to take those results. And so they were a little bit disappointed that I hadn't actually been able to get through an entire 10-minute period for their test to be effective, or to be valid. So at that point, I've been playing tennis for a few months, just very light. Just I've been going to a social tennis thing just to get a little bit of exercise. And I was actually feeling quite not fit, but I was feeling, quite good. I was feeling like, okay, if there's ever going to be a period of time where if there's ever going to be a test that I'm going to get this exercise thing done, it's going to be this time. And so I ate healthily that week. I'd had a salad and some sushi the night before, so I made sure that I was sort of trying to be as healthy as I can in the lead up to it. But then started the test, jumped on the treadmill, and unfortunately, 6 minutes in, I got 6 minutes. I'm quite proud of that. But 6 minutes in, I felt the feeling come on. And what was different about this case is when they do these tests, they actually disable your ICD, so you don't have ICD protection.
For everyone, or is that just for you?
I think it might generally be for everybody. It's still probably a case by case, but I think the general advice is to turn it off because when you're exercising, there's always the risk that your device will misinterpret your exercise rate as something that it needs to shock. It might have been it might have been just for me in that I know, like I said earlier, my zones are set quite low. So when I actually doing heavy exercise, I'll probably will be peaking past what my zone is set. So that might just be for me. But yeah, so they turned the ICD off completely for the period. And I was a little bit worried about that, but they put the external defibrillators. They pre-applied the external defibrillator pads on my chest, and they're like, "Don't worry, if anything happens, we'll shock you back with this defibrillator." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not the point at all." Like, I trust my ICD. I don't trust the this defibrillator that you've just stuck on my chest. Like, if I had an option of what should save my life, I'd choose my
Yeah,
ICD.
that's one positive
Um,
from all these experiences. You know your ICD works, and you got that trust in it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so he turned off my CD and I was on the treadmill and running along. 6 minutes in, I felt the feeling, and it's just, I mean, I really wanted to continue. So I told him, I was like, I really felt like I just felt the feeling. I really want to stop. And he was like, nope, nothing's on the ECG. And that was quite surprising. Apparently, nothing showed anything. So even though I felt the feeling, nothing had been shown on the ECG that indicated anything was about to go wrong. And the nurse even, they didn't want me to stop because and to their credit, I imagine they get quite a lot of unfit and unhealthy patients, which we are naturally in our situation, which we all are. And so they're probably used to people just wanting to stop early for those reasons. So the nurse put a hand on my back to keep me on the treadmill instead of stepping off. But yeah, I can't, it's hard to describe the dread that you feel when you go into that feeling. It could just, especially now, like I just, it's like I like to sort of, well, not like to, but I tell my friends and family, it's literally the feeling that like I could die in the next 8 seconds. Like I got 8 seconds left to live. What do you do? Like that's really like that's what it comes down to when I feel these feelings is, I've got 8 seconds left to live. What do I do? So I sort of, no matter how much of willpower I wanted to push through it, I couldn't. So I was getting ready to stop, and then all I remember then is the physiologist who was there monitoring the ECG slammed the emergency stop button on the treadmill, a big red button, and then he yelled out, "I need some help in here." And then I sort of had a nice dream and had a nice warm fuzzy feeling, and I remember seeing like it was just I just don't remember seeing anything. I just remember it being like a golden light, and then woke up and the physiologist was doing CPR compressions on my chest as I woke up. The nurse was doing oxygen intubation over my mouth, and there was a blue light flashing in the background, and there was about half a dozen other doctors and surgeons all standing around me. Some had looked like they'd just run straight in from a surgery or something. They had still had their gloves on and hands up as they were standing over me. So I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I know, And my
Had you
first
been
thought,
shocked at that point when you said that he was doing CPR on you? Had you been shocked, or did you come back through the CPR? I know it's very unusual.
perhaps I think I yeah I think I imagine they shocked me. But I never really asked or checked or yeah I mean I never really even bothered to. It's a good question. I've never thought about that until now. But yeah, I have to imagine that they either turned back on my ICD for it to shock me, or they used the external defibrillators to shock me.
Because one of the questions which you see every now and again is, if I've got an ICD and it fails, can someone use an external defibrillator on me? And the answer is yes,
Right.
but that may have been an
Yeah.
actual case where it's happened.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I guess, if that puts anyone's mind at ease, like they put the pads on me before I did the test, and they said there was no problems with using an external defibrillator with. So I guess, if that helps anybody. But yeah, so I sort of woke up from that. My first thought was, yeah, there was that one of the nurse who put a hand on my back. She was over talking to another doctor, and she's like, "It's so weird. He said that he felt a feeling before anything came up on the ECG." And I just thought, like, I bloody told you so. Like that was the first thought that came to my head, which is, I told you so. I told you I had a feeling, and I told you I was about to die, and you didn't believe me. But to his, I mean, yeah, they, I understand their reasons for wanting to keep me on.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that was that, and then yeah, that was just I sort of got I mean, it's a little bit, again, a little bit macabre, but I got a 5-star treatment from the hospital because I guess they had realized that they had, probably they weren't 100% in the right there, so they put me up in, one of their better suites and I just did an observation, for the
Uh-huh.
weekend after that,
I'm
but
glad they did.
yeah.
One of the things you that was different from when you explained previous experiences, when you had the shock from your ICD, I don't recall you mentioning anything about the time that you were out, but when you were out that time, you said you saw a light, didn't you? And you had a nice dream and a warm, fuzzy feeling. Was that
Yeah,
correct?
so yeah, so I mean, the other times I've passed out, the second one, like I said, I had this sort of segue of New York images and sound effects, and the time when I was at my desk, I had the dream that my H person had written on the whiteboard my name 3 times. So I think, I
Oh,
had
hadn't that
visions
actually
slash.
happened then?
No, no, not at all.
Oh, I thought that had happened. That's sorry.
No, sorry, I don't know if so yeah, we don't have a whiteboard. We don't know. I don't know where that, I don't know where that magically appeared from, but yeah, we don't have a whiteboard, and it was actually the first thing when I woke up. I looked over, like, to where the whiteboard was in this dream, and there was no whiteboard there, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird." Could have sworn she wrote my name 3 times on a whiteboard. Um, But yeah, so it was a really surreal feeling. But yeah, so that was also, I guess, a vision slash dream, whatever you want to call it. But this time it was more. I don't remember dreaming per se. It was just yeah, like I said, just a really warm, fuzzy feeling. I don't remember seeing light. I just remember the color yellow. Like I don't necessarily feel like I saw light, but it just felt yellow. If I had to describe it, I don't know how or why. I just say yellow, yellow and warm and fuzzy. So yeah, that was a weird feeling to wake up to, and again, waking up to that, I don't know if they'd given me adrenaline when I was under, but I woke up feeling great. I could honestly have ran a marathon. I was like, just get me back on that treadmill. I'll finish in 10 minutes. Like, yeah, if you want your 10 minutes done, like, let's go. I'm ready. Let's do it. Get me back up there. But yeah, I felt really, really good when I woke up. And it's weird, those feelings, because that's what leads to almost a resentment of being kept in for observation, because you're like, no, I feel great. Like, what are you doing? I feel like I could go outside and run around in circles. Like, why are you keeping me here for observation?
So, so you've gone through all of that, and that was a couple of years ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I've actually now, touched wood, been alive, or been incident free for the longest period I have in 10 years. So it's been 2 years now since that,
So,
and
what do you put that
yeah,
down
more or
to? Did
less.
they change any medications or your programming?
So I don't think they changed my medications per se. Dr. Vanova previously put me on spironolactone, which is a water drug or a water pill, and she then recommended I go on a drug called ranolazine, which is actually not to do with arrhythmias at all. It's a angina medication that's supposed to help with angina feelings, and I think the idea behind that is just to help relieve some of those feelings, to stop so many times when I think something's wrong just mentally. But nothing, I don't think, that actually would have affected the functioning of my heart. So for me, it was just about, really, at that point, I really cut back on exercise. I just stopped what I was doing exercise wise. I stopped going for walks, stopped riding the Boris bikes. Just sort of, I took the transplant doctor's advice after that incident was, don't exercise. So I guess I sort of attribute it to just not exercising, I think, is what I'd attribute to it. And it is one of those awkward things where I'm starting to get a little bit restless, and I've been getting a little bit restless now for the last year or so, and I've really wanted to go to a gym, and it's definitely important. It's also important in the transplant process to be as fit and healthy as you can be, because you got to be a certain standard to be able to survive an operation for a heart transplant and survive the process afterwards. So I do want to go to a gym, and it's this existential dilemma that I guess I have is, do I if I risk going to the gym and exercising, it may ultimately lead to my death. Like so is it worth exercising knowing that I literally might die because of it? And so it's just it's a tough
It's a
mental
real conundrum.
problem to solve.
Are there
Yeah.
no specialist cardiac rehab people that can help you with that? Find
Yes.
your optimal level?
Yes, they did help me with that again at Charing Cross Hospital. They're really good. They've got a team that handles that, and they've got a cardiac rehab class for people with heart conditions. They do a rehab with them as well. And I did join that for quite a while, for about 6 months after, and they're the ones that also had this counselor, specialized counselor in their team as well. And they did a beep test, an exercise beep test with me just to get some indication on my levels and my limits. And they gave me a sort of restriction of don't walk more than 3 kilometers per hour, like speed, and don't ride a bike more than 5 kilometers per hour speed. So, which is quite slow. As you imagine, I think everybody walks a little bit faster than 3 kilometers an hour. That's quite a slow
Mm.
speed. Um, but yeah, so they did those tests, and if I did want to get back into it, it probably would be the best to go back to Charing Cross Hospital and see if I could get into those courses. But I do also recognize that those courses have limited spaces, and I'd hate to think I was taking someone's spot who had just had a cardiac arrest and maybe was, not as confident in their abilities as I am, perhaps. So I guess I appreciate that they're probably quite busy, and if they don't have the spaces, then it'll be up to me to sort my own exercise out. But the other downside to it as well is that just actually finding a gym membership has been quite the challenge. So there's a couple of gyms now I've approached, and every time I've told them that I have a health condition and then they might need to watch out, they've been like, okay, well, we need to get your doctor and your cardiologist to sign off on it. And they wanted like a medical certificate before they would let me sign up. And every time I went to my doctor or my cardiologist, they would just say no. And so I couldn't really provide them with the right documentation. So I think my only option now is to probably hire my own personal physical trainer or something to run me through some light drills, or just try some other forms of light exercising myself as well, maybe.
I mean, there are plenty of alternatives. You don't have to go to be a gym bunny or whatever. There are
Yeah,
there's plenty of way. You save yourself plenty of money as well by not going to one. So one of the reasons actually I wanted to talk to you, apart from going through all your history, is you always seem to have a sort of quite a positive attitude considering what's actually happened through the last 10 years. And in particular, you've done a number of posts in the group about your travel exploits because you haven't let it sort of get in your way to. I know you've mentioned that you had some sort of safety behaviours, but you have still managed to pack plenty into your life as well as the cardiac events, haven't you?
yeah. Well, that's always been super important to me. I think I definitely have these safety behaviors, but in my mind at least, where I do these safety behaviors isn't affected by the location. It's I'm going to stop every 500. If I'm going to stop every 500 meters, in my mind, it makes no difference if I'm in London or if I'm in Paris. It's not gonna change it. So why not go to Paris? I'm still going to have this condition. I'm still going to have to stop every couple of 100 meters. But just, why not go and enjoy Paris while I can, or why not go and enjoy America, or, the rest of Europe? I think for me, I've sort of, the way I look at my condition is that it's always going to be there. It's not, it's not going to go away. So it's going to follow me no matter where I go. So why sit here in London and not go and experience these things when I could go and experience all these other places, and I'm still going to have the condition. I can't, leaving London isn't going to make the condition worse, and coming back to London isn't magically going to make the condition any better. So just have to, just continue on and get out and do what you want to do and have fun and see the world. And so
You never know. Leaving
yeah,
London might make it better because since you've been
yeah,
here, you've had
exactly.
a lot of shocks, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, London doesn't have a great track record, so even to be, I did think that of Australia at the time. I remember when I went back for my visa, I was like, "Oh, the fresh air here is amazing." Like, I hadn't tasted fresh air like I had when I went back to Australia in so long. You really don't realize just how, like it did shock me the first time I came to London. About after a month or so, I started to have black snot. And you kind of like, where, like, this isn't normal. Like, why? It's just actually from catching the tube every day to work every morning, and like just the amount of soot and dirt and grime that we must be breathing in when we're on the tube isn't pleasant to think about. So I did think that the fresh air might have done me some good, but then I ended up having another shock at the airport anyway. But yeah, yeah, it's just one of those things. I guess I try to, and being young as well, it's just, well, I like to call myself young. I like to think I'm self as young, but you know, there's still a long road to go yet, and I can't give up yet.
No,
I
absolutely,
guess, you know,
absolutely.
okay. Like I said, I'm gonna have it forever. It's not gonna get any better. So, why not get out there and do what I can now before it does get any worse?
Hmm.
I'd hate to be in a situation where I get to the point where I need a transplant, and then I can no long and then, God forbid anything happens that I can, like, it's literally physically impossible for me then to go out and do any of this stuff, and then regret that I didn't do it when I had the chance. So
Hmm.
yeah, for me it's just about, yeah, and I think I definitely realize that it's not for everybody, but this is again where I attribute just the whole idea of the forget and package it away, is that it really does let me do these really, talking to you and talking to other people, like, oh, why'd you do that? You got a heart condition. Like, why did you go skiing in the French Alps? Why did you go zip lining down? And, part of my response is because I wanted to, but part of it is also because I forgot I had a heart condition is the other one, so because I didn't even think about my heart condition until I got up the top of the mountain, and then I was like, well, there's only one way to go now. So I just ended up skiing down. Same with I went down the zip line in Las Vegas, and I didn't even think about my heart condition until I got to the actual harness, and I was harnessed into the zip line, and I started to feel a little bit elevated, a little bit funny, and I was like, "Well, there's only one way to go now. I can't really back out now. I just got to go down the zip line and just hope for the
Hmm.
best." But yeah, so I think that's definitely helped.
I think
Uh,
possibly the more you do as well, the less you think about it as well. You don't want to be
exactly, yeah,
trapped in a cocooned world, really, do you?
yeah, definitely. I think the more you do start to go out and just bite the bullet and go and do what might seem scary, almost to my counselor's credit, just thinking now, yeah, how he was sort of trying to get me off these safety behaviors of stopping, that same mechanic of just keep pushing it and pushing it has also helped me, or has helped me, sort of get over my fears and allowed me to travel. Because you go to Paris for a weekend and nothing happens. You go to the French Alps and nothing happens. You go to Vegas and nothing happens. And so when you come up to your next destination, you're a little more inclined to believe nothing is going to happen than what you may have previously thought. So yeah, just I think just getting out and doing it, and that's Nike commercial. Just
Hmm.
do it.
In
Um,
small steps, perhaps, though, rather than sort of going straight to the top of that mountain, maybe like you've done, go just do a short city break or something like that.
yeah, exactly. I think and yeah, I guess I'm fortunate enough to be in a job that does require those short city breaks. So while I like to think those are big steps, or while it might seem like those are big steps, what happened before that French Alps was about 3 or 4 trips to Cannes, to Switzerland, to just other little places that weren't very stressful on the heart at all. You know, they were very chill, just walking around the city, taking it in, exploring. You know, so they weren't extreme, like they weren't extreme in any sense of the word. But yeah, those small steps of just going to those cities and realizing that after 4 or 5 times, you know what, nothing happened. Like no, and it's just that idea of, yeah, like if it's gonna happen, it's just gonna happen anywhere. So and yeah, might as well just go and be somewhere that's fun.
Mhm. You might get to experience the hospital food in different countries. You never know.
Yeah, well, that's
You
it.
might be
Yeah.
able to write a guidebook on it.
Can you imagine? That would just be that's quite a unique hospital foods of the
Yeah.
world. Yeah, I like it.
Well,
Sponsored by Jamie Oliver. Yeah.
one of the posts that you did in the group a while back, and I don't know if you actually did it, but you were going to go to Japan and you were inquiring about eating the fugu. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it,
Oh yes,
glowfish,
yeah,
which is poisonous in its own right if it's not prepared correctly. Did you ever do that?
yeah. No, so I went to Japan and I actually did seek it out, but I couldn't find any within sort of reasonable area and reasonable price actually of what we were looking for. So I resigned to that, but we did go.
Some might say it's
So
pushing the death wish a little bit too far.
yeah, just a little bit too far, but on the other side, I still, I guess, got that extreme fix where they've got an experience over there called Mari Kart, which I guess I have to point out for their sake. They like to tell everybody, they're not affiliated with Mario at all. They're not affiliated with Nintendo at all. But basically, it's, if you know the video game Mario Kart by Nintendo, it's a racing game where you drive go-karts around and you can throw things at each other. And in Japan, they have an experience where you can actually get a red go kart, just like the video game, and drive through the streets of Tokyo. And so we decided to do that. And so here I am in Tokyo on a go kart next to massive lorries and trucks where you're just like, they can't see me down here. I'm in a go kart and the wheel is bigger than I am. And they're just sort of driving past and you're just cruising at 100 kilometers an hour in a go kart. It's just that was a wild experience. So I still got my little bit of a a little bit of an extreme kick out of during my trip. That was my fugu, was just driving next to a lorry in a go kart.
So one thing I've got to say, after all your experiences and you're sort of pushing the limits, are you scared of dying or are you not scared of dying?
No, I mean this. Yeah, I think it's a common question for people in academia. I mean, I'm definitely scared of dying. Um, I don't want to die. I don't believe in the afterlife. So I like it, the way I treat it. This is our one life. This is, once we die, we die. That's it. And I definitely don't want that to happen. I'm definitely dreading the day it happens. And yeah, I think that, I think that's just more of a personal. It's not so much. I don't definitely don't like it. It hasn't changed. I don't fear dying because of my heart condition. That's probably the one caveat I'd do to it. I feared dying before I even knew I had this heart condition. Just yeah, I think what I sort of come to grips with though is that I guess I guess I just I trust my ICD. I trust the team here in London that's looking after me. I highly doubt any of the activities I do overseas are going to lead to my instant death. So like I mean it's a horrible way to look at it, but I feel like if anything did go wrong, I'd still have at least some time when I came back to get it sorted and get it treated, and again just sort of forgetting about things for a little bit as well helps. So yeah, but I definitely fear dying, and it's not a fun quite like sort of thing to think of or look forward to. And but yeah, I guess you can't let that stop you. Everyone's gonna die. Everyone, yeah, everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gonna do it. It's not. I don't want to. If anyone ever said to the option to drink this pill and you won't die, I'll definitely take the potion. But yeah, no, I think you just got to get over that and keep on keeping on.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end now, and you're, as I mentioned at the beginning, you're probably the youngest survivor that I've spoken to so far on the podcast, and yours is probably quite extreme in the number of shocks that you've experienced. But do you think you could relay any advice to someone who's perhaps in a similar situation as yourself, who's maybe in their 20s or whatever, and have just had a cardiac arrest? Have you got any advice gained over the last 10 years that you can help allay any fears they may have about the future?
Yeah, I guess like what I'd tell anybody and probably tell myself, back, at that age, like it is scary. Like I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it to you. Everything about this situation, everything about it is scary, and I don't think any less of anybody who gives into that fear or, doesn't handle that fear in a way that I've handled it. But, recognize, like, just, like recognize within yourself it is scary, but take those risks. Don't let that cage you into a box. Just I mean, yeah, getting it to sound like a Nike commercial, but just do it. Just move to Australia, move to America, move to London. You know, just don't just do it. You've got one life, and we've got a little bit more complicated life now than what other people have, but you've got to just live it how you want to live it.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with that. Obviously, with some caveats that don't do anything totally stupid, but
Sure,
we
yeah.
have got one life, and it would be really easy just if you have an event like this, and then just cuss it yourself and let other people wrap you in cotton warm bubble wrap and just not do anything and don't live that life that you've been fortunate enough to have another go at. So get out there and do it, just like Jamie's. And I take my hat off to you for having the balls, as it were, to and confidence and guts to carry on doing things. And I know you've got new avenues that you want to explore in the future, which sound exciting. So I thank you very much for this really great conversation.
Thank you.
It's been a real insight into a young person or young survivor's life and how you can sort of come through it the other side, really. So thank you very much, Jamie.
Cool. Yeah. I hope someone out there has taken some sort of value from this, and I hope it helps.
I'm sure it will. So thanks very much, and we'll speak again soon. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
This concludes this episode of the Life After Cardiac Arrest podcast, and I'd love to know what you think. And you can do that via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or the website southerncardiacarrestuk.org. And you can find us by Googling Southern Cardiac Arrest UK or the Life After Cardiac Arrest podcast. If you have found value in this or other episodes, please help spread the word by leaving a review on your podcast provider such as Apple or wherever is convenient. And don't forget, if you want to know more about life after cardiac arrest, check out our books, Life After Cardiac Arrest, on Amazon. Make sure you click subscribe, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.